We all love a good villain. Either that's in books, movies, and even video games. And sometimes a villain can actually be remembered as one of the best aspects of a certain media.
Did I ever tell you the definition of insanity?
They sadly also often influence people that are in need of a role model, or at least from my experience, they want to embody the same cool vibe.
Because I want to fit in.
People sometimes believe that because of the actions of the main protagonist, that a good man can be driven to insanity that makes the villainous behavior justified for some reason. Even sometimes it can be easy to sympathize with the portrayed villain and feel more conflicted about the main bad guy than you were at the start. And one of these villains is Dr. Wallace Breen. The Half-Life 2 fanbase has always been conflicted on why the Half-Life world hates Dr. Breen. After all, he was the man that ended the 7-hour war with unconditionally surrendering to the Combine and saving humanity from complete annihilation. This similar sentiment is shared in a country that mined borders, France. First, some context. During World War II, as you all know, Germany invaded France with stunning success and was able to get France to sign an armistice. This armistice effectively split France in two, one German occupied zone in the north and one quote-unquote independent French administration in the south. The men who signed the armistice did not sign it because they wanted this occupation. They thought it was necessary for the survival of France and to prevent its complete annihilation. Charles Hunsinger, the man who signed the armistice, even tried to negotiate a less harsh armistice, but failed. But what followed was not a lenient treatment by the French administration in compassion for the French populace. The head of the French state was now in the hands of Marshal Pétain. He created an authoritarian system centered around himself, effectively establishing a dictatorship. Harsh treatment followed for people who oppose the regime and minorities. I won't go into too much about Vichy France because YouTube will nuke this video, but I will leave links into the description concerning this topic. While to an outsider, Pétain is clearly a traitor and a bad person, to a French person, this is actually much more complicated. He was a general that fought it for done, and to some French people it can also be seen as the man that saved France from annihilation and even preserved parts of its culture and identity. While I personally don't believe this should excuse his actions, he was very popular and is still pretty popular in some parts of French society. Pétain also spoke a lot about collaboration and creating a better future. In fact, here's a speech that I managed to translate that Pétain spoke to address the armistice to the French people. Frenchmen, I put this question to you. I asked you to measure its scope and answer in the confines of your consciousness. Our relations with Germany have been defined by an armistice of which could be provisional. Dragging out this situation makes it much harder to support insofar as it governs relations between two great countries. As for collaboration offered in the month of October 1940 by the Chancellor of the Reich under conditions that made me appreciate their deference. It was a long-term labor and has not yet been able to bear all of its fruits. We must be able to overcome a heavy heartage of distrust handed down by centuries of dissensions and quarrels and to turn ourselves toward broad perspectives that can open up a reconciled continent to our activity. This is the goal toward which we are heading, but it is an immense labor, which requires on our part as much will as it does patience. Other tasks absorb the German government. A gigantic task in development to the east in defense of a civilization and which can change the map of the world. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? You guys beginning to see the pattern here? It's clear to me that Breen has been inspired by people like Pétain. Both have a lot in common in my opinion. Both see collaboration as something necessary and they both excuse the tyranny that happens to their citizens by saying this is simply necessary for the future of their people. To me personally, the real reason why they are hated so much is because of their full collaboration to an empire that committed some of the worst horrors and atrocities imaginable in history. Pétain allowed thousands of French Jews to be deported to Germany and hunt down people that stood against him. And Breen collaborated in the enslavement of humanity, while enjoying relative comfort as its administrator. While hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of human lives were utterly and completely destroyed by the Combine. But to Breen, I think there is more than just collaboration with an evil empire. So first, some backstory on the man. Dr. Wallace Breen was the administrator at the time of the Black Mesa incident. It was he that was responsible for scheduling the unstable Gen crystal named GG3883 to be analyzed by the anti-mass spectrometer. Despite various malfunctions and protests by his fellow scientists, the anti-mass spectrometer was to be operated at a dangerous 105 capacity, causing a resonance cascade. Before the test, scientist Stel Gordon that the administrator went to great lengths to get the sample, which alludes to the various researches that went missing in the border world. The administrator here, in my opinion, was in collusion with the G-Man. Everything had to go wrong perfectly for a resonance cascade to happen. And I think that the Pacific sample that was brought in for the test was the one that would make this result even more certain. When this eventually leads to the Black Mesa incident, Dr. Breen is nowhere to be seen, heard, or even mentioned throughout the game. To me, this makes me even speculate more, like, how did he escape Black Mesa? Like I said before, I'm almost certain that he was in collusion with the G-Man, and I can assume with the deal he made with the G-Man that he was to be safely evacuated from Black Mesa. Hell, it's a miracle that Dr. Isaac Kleiner, Eli, Barney, Dr. Magnuson even escaped Black Mesa. And knowing that, it makes me wonder if he was involved in any way with sending of troops and Black Ops into Black Mesa to kill all individuals involved with the test to prevent knowledge of the accident coming out. Because the knowledge of this would be really damaging to his character as the administrator of Earth. But what I can't say for 100% that the reason Breen became an administrator of Earth was because of his deal with the G-Man. No man gets that lucky from being the man that organized the worst incident in human history to being its administrator, without at least some interference. He was simply the right man in the right place at the right time to be saved and to be given such glory and power. For the next 20 years, Breen would sit by and allow the Combine to strip Earth of its resources, oceans, humans, technology, basically everything. Not that he had much choice of the matter. Him resisting would have led to his own demise and be replaced by someone or something else. But still, his collaboration should be reviled. The first time you see Dr. Breen, he welcomes you and your fellow citizens to City 17 and making it seem like a peaceful and kind place, instead of the actual dystopian hellhole it is. According to a conversation between two citizens, Breen was first placed in City 14, one of the remaining urban centers the Combine restored, making me think that this was actually the Combine's main base of operations before the Citadel was built. And to be honest, it's kind of weird to me that the Citadel was only built 5 years before Gordon came out of stasis, and take note that the Combine at the point of Gordon's return were only 20 years on Earth. That's a long ass time to not build a main base of operations, but anyway. Moving through the city, you'll see propaganda posters of Breen making him seem more like a dictator than a humble servant. While you're moved through the city, Breen also goes into our human instincts, saying that this has to be first overcome before humans can procreate again. Something as human as instincts being eliminated makes me think that Breen is simply saying here, you will have to transform into a Combine soldier before you will ever have any biological offspring. Breen also clearly states in his speech that human instincts basically sees the Combine as a threat, which, logically. So in reality, I just think that the Combine want to, control humans by turning them into Combine soldiers. Or, worse. Although I should know that Metropolis do have some sort of reproduction simulation if they do a good deed. Although it's not known if this is with another human. Alyx is actually the first main character to talk about Breen, simply suggesting that her father has a deep hatred of the man. In Kleiner's office, there's actually a picture of the anomalous materials science team. This includes Gordon and Eli. And a certain man's face is crossed out here. You can guess who he crossed out. It's pretty obvious that at this point, Dr. Breen is hated by his former peers and even disliked, to say the very least, by the average citizen. You just can't escape Dr. Breen too. In every house he is yapping on a television about instincts, evolution and collaboration. Throughout the canal chapter, Breen is seen on a glitching monitor, where the G-Man is also to be seen. Later, you enter a room and Breen talks about Gordon Freeman, calling him a disruptor and synonymous with the darkest urges of instincts, ignorance, and decay. It's always been odd to me why Breen fears Gordon so much. He's just one man against a massive empire. I'll get back into this point later in the video, but he tries his best to convince the citizens of City 17 that Gordon is a sort of demon that has come back to Earth to drive humanity into oblivion. It's also very clear that he tries to deflect any and all responsibility about the Black Mesa incident off of himself. And he specifically blames the science team that he deems responsible for it, which, makes him incredibly hypocritical. When reaching Eli's base and you look at the corkboard, he tells you that Breen was in a position to manage their surrender with the Combine, basically giving up Earth and every living being to it at the mercy of the Combine. So he could have the power to rule. Well, yes, this could have saved humanity from direct annihilation. In reality, it only slowly strangled humanity to death rather than snapping the neck instantly. I speculate he was elevated to this position thanks to the deal he made with the G-Man. I think by now you can already see that Dr. Breen is not some sort of misunderstood hero, or just a guy doing the right thing. He is in fact willingly acting out the Combine's plan as a mere puppet. While his power has limited what the advisors command, he still wields a lot of influence over Earth and the subsequent misdeeds that befall humanity. And honestly, this is only partly true. He, in fact, put himself in this position. It's clear to me that Dr. Breen sees himself as more valuable or at least superior to the rest of humanity. Talking like he's some sort of emperor or Russian czar talking to his subjects. At least in this conversation with Dr. Mossman.
You would have had Freeman if you'd been patient and just waited for my signal.
We weren't entirely sure you were ever going to get around to that. Human loyalties being what they are.
Dr. Breen... As I have stated before, you have to let Eli come around on his own.
I have known Dr. Vance far longer than you, my dear. I'm afraid your feelings for him may have blinded you.
Feelings? This has nothing to do with feelings. It's a simple truth that when Eli believes in
This
our...
is not open to debate, Dr. Mossman.
Doctor, please.
So sorry, Judith. I'm all out of time.
When Gordon, Eli, and Alyx are captured, he talks about how having them both in his keeping, that he now can dictate every bargain he cares to make with the Combine. Throughout the entire game, Breen has been using a heavy hand on both the Combine and trying to get the rebels to surrender. The reason being that the Combine advisors have begun to slowly view Breen with suspicion the further the game progresses, reaching its height during the uprising. Capturing the leaders of the resistance and the main initiator of the rebellion puts him at basically equal footing with the Combine advisors. And in fact, Dr. Breen's ego inflates so much that he now sees himself as the G-Man's equal, proposing Gordon a sort of deal or contract contrary to the one he has with the G-Man, confirming, in my opinion at least, that he knows about the G-Man and probably has done some deals with him before. Breen wasn't just merely a puppet. He was more than a willing actor that worked alongside the Combine advisors and at many times could be seen as equals in causing massive amount of destruction to humanity. A truly evil man. So, why is this not the full story that everybody in the Half-Life community accepts? Well, I think it has to do with Robert Culp's great performance as Dr. Breen in Half-Life 2, and how iconic his speeches are. To me, Breen is probably one of the most memorable things in Half-Life 2, and I still rate him as one of the best antagonists in gaming history, and I think this is sometimes overlooked. And with sometimes I mean way too often. Also, side note here, Robert Culp was best buds with Hugh Hefner. You know, the guy that started the Playboy magazine. Just a really fun fact here. But what we really can't take away from this is that Dr. Breen would have never reached this power, in my opinion, if the G-Man and his employers never stepped in and made a deal with him, making Breen more of a pawn in G-Man's game than anything else. Which leads me to my final conclusion. Breen isn't the most evil man in existence in the Half-Life 2 universe. It's actually the man that started it all and planned everything since the very beginning.